Okay. And I believe we're live. Hello. I see we have somebody in the chat. Uh, where are you coming in from? Yes, they are. Yes. They should be on our channel. There's a section for live in our. They're actually all. The special sections are all recorded with the exception of the one we just did on getting out without much money, because that was done with Google Meet. And we did that because we kind of wanted to have a different format and it'd be more of a like interactive session for the people in the room. We'll probably be doing something about that is more of an info session in the future. That wasn't the best format in retrospect. Okay. Yeah, we're going to figure out some other way of doing that. We actually have we've put something up on the blog, and we've got and we'll probably do some kind of presentation again. We just we felt like the format that we chose for that one didn't serve us well, so we're going to have to rework that. You can also drop in office hours and talk to us. That honestly, I think, is a better format for just talking about the special challenges of getting out without much money, because that tends to be very individual. But do stay here. We'll be talking about stuff that's of relevance to everybody. Okay. That's cool. These info sessions are basically all the same. We're just repeating the info. And, well, of course, the questions are different each time, but yeah, come in the office hours. But you'll be well prepared for the office hours after this. Okay, I'm going to start. I don't want to. It's 5 after. So, I'm Ann Ogborn. I'm the director of Trans Rescue. We're a Dutch foundation. We get transgender people out of dangerous places. And to date, we've gotten over 150 people out of various places, all of the green countries. Our message today is that you can get out. We really think that almost everybody can get out. And we want, and we have confidence in that. And this session is to help you plan to do that. Okay, you're better off with more than one plan. Well, you're going to need actually more than one plan. You should have a plan for what do I do to immediately get out of the country if things go sour. Sort of consequences be damned. And then you may have one or more plans depending on how fast things seem to be going bad. For example, this is one for imagine a family that's got they perhaps own a home and they have a lot of things to wrap up and take care of. Well, so they have an immediate plan. They live near the Mexican border. So their immediate plan is they have bug out bag. They throw kids and the bug out bags and in the car, and they immediately go to Mexico. But a more recent plan is they're going to start selling off property and kind of watch closely what happens between now and January, and if it's looking really ugly, then they'll all just fly to Europe and backpack on tourist visa, backpack around. But if it looks like it's going to be a while, then before things go bad, then they're going to try and find a job for their primary breadwinner abroad and let their child finish out the semester, and they think if they have a little time, they can get their company to do a transfer to the EU. By the way, feel free to ask questions. Particularly, I think you're the only person in the chats, or you're the only person watching. So, I guess we've got two people at the moment. But hello, other person. But happy to kind of stop and discuss people's individual situation. We don't have to stay on this. We're here for you. Okay, first step is to get a passport. Folks in the chat, do you have passports? There's a delay, by the way, between when I talk and when you hear it. So, even if you immediately type a response, I'm getting a little bit of there'll be a bit of a lag. Okay, you're about to order yours. Well, great. Here's some tips about how to get a passport. First of all, you probably want to do the urgent travel service, which is a one-day service. You have to go to the service center nearest you and get which may mean traveling to another city, but you can then get it basically overnight. You are going to have to demonstrate that you intend to travel. So you can get, for example, a cancelable airline ticket or an Airbnb reservation in Canada, that kind of thing, particularly if you're within believable driving distance. But you need to demonstrate that you have travel within 14 days of your appointment. You're going to be given options. If you can at all afford it, get both the book and the card when you do this, because that way you will have some form of useful ID outside the country, even if you have to hand over your passport book, which you often do in order to have stamps put in it. It's also useful because you'll be able to, you'll still have something to identify yourself if your passport is lost or stolen. You can ask for extra pages, the so-called big book. That's well worth getting. When you go to your appointment, you're going to have exact cash to pay for it. The passport photos that you will need are honestly best obtained by going to a passport photo place. The post office does them. The Walgreens does them. Those kind of funky, old-fashioned process photos are actually just what the people at the passport office are used to. And I've heard stories of people who kind of printed out their own being rejected for that reason. And it's a lot of hassle for just not doing it the way everybody else does it. Once you have a passport, you can go and request a second one by saying that you intend to travel to two places with passport conflicts. For example, if you intend to travel to both Pakistan and India, or Israel and Palestine. So down the road, this is a thing you can do to ensure that you've got two passport books, essentially two copies of your passport. There are a few things you need to think about. Excuse me. One is whether you should renew. If you only have a little time on your passport, of course, renew it. But if you have like 3 years, it's probably still worth doing it. We always say 2 years, but the downside is you're going to have to let go of your passport in order to do that. The upside is then you will have 7 years on your passport. If you have a choice, I would invite you to consider whether or not to get an X, because J.D. Vance on his website, the Vice President-elect, has a proposed bill that would stop issuing X passports. And we can imagine that down the line that would become, we stop sort of honoring X passports. And there are also a few places you won't be able to travel through. And in particular, Dubai. Of course, I wouldn't encourage trans people to transit Dubai anyway. But if it's what you need in order to get where you're going, you at least have that option. And finally, having a passport in any name is better than having a passport in your proper name. So consider carefully before delaying getting a passport, because you are somewhere in the process of changing your name and your gender marker. Questions? Anybody in the chat? We're now up to 7. If anybody has questions, feel free to stick them in the chat, and we'll stop and answer them. We're happy to talk about people's situations. But otherwise, I'm just going to keep cruising along with info. Okay, the next step. There are a couple of things kind of... Yeah, thanks, Yami Koronu. Groovy. Okay, you got a couple of choices. No, and frankly, if you're used to doing, if you need financial help, I would say look outside the trans community, because everybody's in this situation. We're all moving. I'm not moving. I'm in the Netherlands. But everybody in the U.S. is trying to get out, and I think anything like GoFundMe's are going to soon get overwhelmed. Remember that if you're leaving, a lot of your stuff is probably going to get left behind. So consider. Yeah, I know. For a whole family, it can be a considerable burden. I'm aware of that. You know, one thing, if you are trying to get out, though, consider the fact that you may be selling off a bunch of your stuff, and that may be money you can use up front to get passports. Okay, so the next step is get all your interpersonal relationships in a position where you can leave. You're going to have, friends, family, people around you, your spouse. If you're in a relationship, your partner or partners are going to definitely they're likely to be more anxious to get out than you are, or less anxious. We always say that everybody's plan has to depend on what they think is going to happen, and there's so much uncertainty, you probably don't have exactly the same opinion as the people around you. There are some things you can do. You're going to get some, it's also it's a scary event. There are some things you can do to kind of alleviate that. First of all is admit that it is happening and it may involve some pain. However, at the same time, it can be a good thing. My life has just improved in many kind of like small practical ways since I've moved to the Netherlands. I kind of saw this coming early and I got out. I'm now living in the Netherlands, and frankly, it's lovely here. I have health care. But you may be getting reactions from folks around you who, for example, don't really want to hear that things are getting scary. One thing you can do if you just plain have never traveled outside the United States is watch some travel videos. The world's a lovely place, and see more of it. I would caution you that some travel videos are get their kind of their drama by having like danger travel wherever. So might avoid those, but the world's full of fun places. Come to the Netherlands. How are the Netherlands about disabled folks? Infrastructure accommodations are not quite as good as the United States. Whether it affects your ability to immigrate here depends exactly on your situation. We're currently trying to locate somebody who's truly an expert on the disability system. And so because we feel like we're not serving people well by pretending to be experts when we're not, and the topic's complicated, but generally there's little discrimination, and there's a tremendously good social support system. You may have to demonstrate that you're not going to become a burden on the healthcare system. So, but if you can get here, it's great. Like I say, modulo the fact that honestly things like curb cuts are always a little more iffy here. ADA, the ADA is a little stronger than the Dutch legislation, but the social acceptance and the social awareness of disability access is better. So, okay. Yep. So hang on. I skipped a slide. Okay. So here's some ways to get out. We're going to spend most of the rest of the time talking about all these different ways, but here's kind of a rundown. There's some of the normal things you probably think of, like getting a job overseas. There's a system called Rentista that is meant for people who work remotely. If in many places they're happy to have you if you have a job that is remote and outside the country. So if you work remotely for a U.S. company, you can move to South America, which is on more or less the same longitude, and work from there. And South America is happy to have you. There are some practical ways you can get citizenship in a fairly short period of time. Time's getting a little short for these, but they still are relevant. And there are plenty of tech companies hiring in Mexico and Brazil. Those companies, like I say, there's an advantage. You can move to, say, Suriname, live in this kind of beautiful country, and live very cheaply, continue to work at your U.S. Remote job, and if you stay at your U.S. salary, you'll be a fairly wealthy person in fairly short order because your living expenses will be low, particularly if you're careful about your living expenses and don't sort of buy all your food from the fancy expat store. Okay, another way that's particularly of use if you don't have much money or a lot of skills that you can convert to money is there are lots of people out on the hippie trail kind of being perpetual tourists, and we'll talk about some of those. You might be able to move just to the border and then de facto be living in, say, Canada or Mexico, but retaining your legal residence in the United States. And that comes with some positives and negatives. And then we'll talk about some ways that don't work. Notably, asylum. As an American, you're not actually going to ever get asylum anywhere. That might change as things get worse, but for the moment, you cannot. Okay. And, all right, the first way is, this is kind of what we often think of as immigration. First way is, if you can get a job overseas, get a job overseas. Usually then the employer will pay for the visa. If you find them hesitant to, suggest that you might be open to working an arrangement so that doesn't cost them. That is, that you would be, that they could, for example, take it out of your salary. that might make you on an even footing with local hires and make you more attractive. So again, if anybody has questions, just ask. We can always stop and deal with them. Another way is if you have some savings and are, somewhere old enough to be sort of accumulating retirement savings, you might be able to just get a retirement visa and go somewhere, start living essentially on early retirement, even if you're too young for Social Security. So that gives you a possibility if you are if you can swing that, or if you can swing that if you do some little work on the side. If you have a degree or otherwise have enough experience to be considered a highly skilled worker, then you can come to the Netherlands. You put 5,000 euros, about $5,500, in a Dutch bank account. You establish a company here, which costs a few hundred euros, and you are then allowed to live in the Netherlands, but the only thing you can do is operate your company. That might sound restrictive, except the company can be a consultancy. So it could be, for example, if you would usually be, you're employed as a documentation writer, you can start a consultancy that does computer documentation, and then, lo and behold, the ABC company just employs you as a consultant. Most companies are pretty easy about that. I de facto was a full-time employee, actually at a U.S. company after moving here. Okay, so that's called the DAFT Treaty, and that's a useful way to get out. All right. Digital nomad. If you can make a living remotely, which usually means on the computer, but I'd remind you that it's not necessarily. For example, if you have an Etsy shop and you sell things on Etsy, if they're high value, low weight products, can you ship them from Mexico? And, move your ceramic kiln to somewhere deep inside Mexico, away from the violence. Then you may be able to just live that way. But basically, your money all has to come from outside of the country. You normally will have to demonstrate you already have been working remotely, usually for a period of a year at least, and that you have earned an amount of money that sometimes feels excessive. For example, for many countries, it's $24,000. And frankly, $24,000 is enough to live like a king in, say, Ecuador. So if you can make, but if you can demonstrate that, that's great. Another hiccup is that sometimes they want the money to be something that is essentially guaranteed to continue at exactly the same rate. And of course, if you're an animator, if you're a 3D animator, and you get gigs for various ads and so on, your income's going to go up and down somewhat. But many countries are kind of realizing that that's not a very realistic requirement, and are improving their program. Okay. You can get citizenship. It's not as pie in the sky as it might seem. If you have particularly parents or grandparents who are from a country, you may be able to get citizenship in that country. So if you're Indo-American, or if you have a grandfather who is Italian and once had Italian citizenship, then you may be able to get citizenship by heritage and just become a citizen. And even if that's a place that, and for example, if you don't want to live in Italy, if you become an Italian citizen, you can then live anywhere in Europe. Now, we have an expert on our staff in getting this kind of citizenship. So if you think you possibly could, then write to us. And for some countries, that can go back 3 or 4 generations. You can also get citizenship by investment. You basically take money and invest in a business, and in a country, and then they give you citizenship. For many countries, that amount is $250,000 US, which is a lot, I recognize. But if you have a home, but for some countries it's less. The island of Dominica, it's $50,000. And if you have a home, you easily might have that much in equity. If you do have that much in equity, you can probably liquidate your home, sell your home, and then invest it in property in that country, which could just be buying a house there, and be a long way towards having citizenship by investment. And finally, for some of you, of course, marriage is an option. I discourage trying to arrange a sham marriage. That's an old dodge, and the immigration authorities are really familiar with it and have lots of tricks to prevent it. So if you're going to get married, actually get married. It's also kind of dangerous to get married to somebody that just you're marrying for money, because that gives them an awful lot of access to your life. So I would discourage that one. But yeah, of course, if you have a partner in Europe, then fly over on the 90-day free entry visa and get married. Okay, questions? This is more fun when it's interactive. Okay, another way is to simply pack up and go and become a hippie. There are 600,000 young people traveling around the world on gap year programs, or as gap year, which is like a gap between high school and college, particularly in Europe. A lot of students do this. people traveling around, just enjoying life. There is a program called volunteer tourism, and there are a bunch of these. For example, woofing is willing workers on organic farms. You basically go to an organic farm, you learn something about their permaculture methods, their organic farming methods, and you work on the farm as a volunteer, and you get housing and food. Workaway.info does the same thing, except concentrates on things like working for a nonprofit. So you might be teaching English to children, or helping at a school I did this in Bangalore. You can, or many other kind of these volunteer opportunities. Might be at a historic site, and oftentimes there's various ways to kind of make local money. And there are lots of people making a lifestyle out of this, and you can too. As far as the visa, you're always on a visitor visa, so you tend to go from place to place after your visa runs out. But for many countries, it will, for many countries, that's 6 months. As Sierra asks, if a couple wants to leave the USA together, does it help to have a marriage certificate? Yes, and I would suggest think about where you want to get married. That is, suppose you have a couple, and one person in the couple's a software engineer and can easily get a job anywhere in the world. So they decide they want to live in Germany. And they come to Germany, get a work visa, which is a permanent visa, a permanent resident visa, so they can, they then bring their partner over, and they marry in Germany. You now have a German marriage license. The advantage of that is, given the way the Republicans are going, consider if you are assigned female at birth, trans woman, or trans man, your partner is assigned female at birth, trans man, you're not going to be able to marry, or in the U.S., I don't know what will happen to your marriage as things descend, but I have more confidence in Germany. So you might want to look at whether you want to marry in, which country you want to marry in. Either way, it's going to be the same as far as getting into the Germany. You are going to have the problem that if you're a recent immigrant, they are going to ask questions. But if you can demonstrate that you've been a couple for a long time and you basically are just getting married, although to formalize an existing relationship, that's usually not a problem. But you will have to have, pictures of yourselves together at the beach, show that you've lived in the same house for 3 years, etc., etc., because they will suspect a sham marriage. Of course, if you do that in the U.S., there won't be that suspicion. Another tactic is go ahead and get married in the United States, move to Germany, and then if your marriage is invalidated, just go ahead and get married in Germany. Okay. Um, so, for where you reside, that is where you actually live, doesn't have to be or where you reside. That is your legal residence, where the government's going to send your tax forms. Doesn't have to be the same place that you usually live. For example, if you move to Tacoma, Washington, you can rent a place in Vancouver and keep going over there. Now, you have 6 months in Canada to that you can stay. Now, I do not encourage like staying for 6 months, then coming back for 1 day and going for another 6 months, because immigration will say, well, you're de facto, you're living over there, you must be working there. However, if you come back through the border frequently, so it's like I've been in Canada for 2 weeks and now I'm coming back to the United States. And yes, at the moment I'm actually spending more time in Canada than the U.S. That's usually fine with the immigration. Even if you are single, saying you've got a relationship in Canada can often be a way to answer the question, why are you going to Canada so much? Frankly, if things start to get bad, the question it may be a question that the Canadians quit asking. And should things get bad overnight, you're now in Canada. Even if you, in theory, haven't emigrated, if you're outside the United States when Trump sort of starts rounding up trans people, then the Canadian authorities are going to be extremely reluctant to shove you forcibly over the border. So, okay, some ways that don't work. You cannot successfully prosecute an asylum claim. If you are somewhere and you're about to be deported back to the U.S. and you just need some time, you might claim asylum just so that you can save your butt for a while. But your asylum claim will eventually be rejected. Conditions in the United States do not rise to the point of justifying an asylum claim. You would have trans people would have to be in danger of basically immediately being killed, or it's death, torture, serious bodily harm, long imprisonment, or conditions intolerable to life. It's going to be hard to prove that at the moment. This may change, and we will keep on top of it, and you can. But at the moment, I don't encourage anybody to depend on the asylum system. It's also just not necessary. The fact is that there are many places an American can go, and almost any other option is preferable to being in an asylum system. The asylum system is really a very it's not a great place to be. Nobody wants to be in an asylum system. It's a very hard life. Don't overstay, because that is, if you're someplace and you have a visa for 6 months, you haven't been able to extend it, don't just stay there, because you will eventually get caught, and when you do, it'll then become harder for you to move around, because they will see that in your passport is an overstay. Finally, a thing not to do. We're all trying to help each other. It's a moment for community, and that's great. However, child trafficking is, for very good reasons, a very serious crime. And if you if you send money to Miss Fluffy Bunny, who is 17, to get them out of someplace, and that was done without their parents' permission, you have engaged in child trafficking, and you could end up with a long prison sentence. So don't do it. Be very careful of that one. Okay, some issues. What are you committed to here in the States? If you, we all have commitments. We have pets. We have, we're important to our team at work. We're taking care of our elderly parents. We may have we have possessions. I was part owner of a engineering works and had many tons of industrial machinery before I left, and it was like very painful to lose all that. You may be on disability payments, and we're trying to set up a special session for people in that situation. And you may have to examine whether you have to live without those. That may be the reality. However, the good news is that SSDI appears to be quite mobile. And then finally, this is going to take some money, and that may mean you have to do, you have to get a burger flipper job. You have to do something to make money in order to get out. So, okay. Well, since you have all been really patient sitting through my presentation here, I've got a little present for you. If you have questions, this is our priority line. We're answering the questions that come in here first. So if email usaquestions@transrescue.org. Otherwise, okay, so your next steps. Well, we're doing some special sessions to help you plan. Get your plan together. Get your loved ones on board. Get ready. Get yourself in a position where you're going to leave. Have a plan together, and then carry that plan out. I wish you all good luck. I hope to see you somewhere out in the world. And with that, I'm going to wait for questions here at the end, and when those die off, we'll end. Any more questions? Okay, I think at this point, I'm not seeing any more questions. So thank you. Good night. Good luck. We'll see you out in the wider world.